Somebody needs to say Immanuel. Immanuel. God was with him. When he was a teenager, he got in a fight with a 9'9" dude. His equipment was unequal. He was unequally matched with who? Goliath. His brothers belittled him. His king had a vote of no confidence in him. But God empowered him because God was with him. As a young man, he had a musical gift, and he used it to minister to the king, King Saul. King Saul was jealous of him because King Saul was threatened by him, and King Saul tried to kill him, but his God protected him because God was with him. Somebody needs to say Immanuel. Amen. As a young man, a leader of other men, his men were trapped. The camp where he left his family was captured, burnt to the ground. The women and the children were captured and carried away. His men were whipped and they wept. They were weakened. They cried. And they were about to turn on him and stone him. But the scripture says Immanuel was with him in order to encourage him. Am I making sense? Immanuel means what? God with us. God with us, God with you, and God with what? Me. That's what I want you to walk out of here. God with me. As a father, he did great damage to his family. He had a son named Ammon. His son named Ammon raped his daughter named Tamar. His son named Absalom killed his son Ammon. His son Absalom then turned on him, ran him off of the throne, ran him out of Jerusalem, and was going to take things over. But God was with him. Somebody needs to say Immanuel. Amen. Because God restored him as king of Israel, as a sinner. And everybody know everybody is a sinner, right? A sinner is somebody who falls short of the standard and the goal and the aims of God. And a sinner is anyone who's less than perfect. How many in here are perfect? Raise your right hand. How many are less than perfect? Raise your other right hand. That would be your left hand. That would be check. That's what you're sleeping. All right, if you're less than perfect, raise your other right hand. That would be that hand. Thank you. Are you listening? Immanuel. He committed adultery with who? I knew y'all knew that. And he murdered her husband, whose name was Uriah. He was confronted by the prophet Nathan. He was convicted. He was ashamed. He was cast down as a sinner. But God forgave him. God was with him. And what's the name that says God is with you? Yeah. I only got one point. Guess what the point is? Immanuel. God with us, God with you, and God with me. The sooner you receive the person, the Son, the sooner you'll experience his presence, his power, and his protection in your life. When you receive the person, you receive the presence, the power, and the protection of Immanuel. When you receive the Son, you receive the presence, the power, and the protection of the Son. When you receive the giver, you receive the gift. Emmanuel. It's a promise. God with you. But when you accept the promise and embrace the promise, then you receive the person. When you receive the person, you receive his presence. What's the other P? His power. And what's the other P? His protection. On the corner of Greenmount and Chase Street, you need his presence, his power, and his protection. Between St. Francis and wherever you call home, you need his presence, you need his power, and you need his protection. You're in the 10th grade now, you got a few more years before you graduate, but you need his presence, you need his power, and you need his. That's one of my boys. That's one of my boys. Try to act like he is visible. That's one of my boys, and I've been doing that ever since I met him. You need his presence, you need his power, and you need his what? You need his protection. You're a 12th grader, and you're on your way somewhere with your life. I don't know exactly where it is, and you don't know exactly where it is right now. But I know you're on your way somewhere with your life. Receive the person, you receive the presence, the power, and the protection of Immanuel. And I don't care where you're going to need it. Am I making sense? And all of that is wrapped up in the idea, in the notion, and in the name. What's that name? Immanuel. The name means what? God. Let's make it personal. God with you and God with me. I hope you're listening to me. And I hope you don't hear me as a preacher. I hope you don't hear me as a lawyer. I want you to hear me as your grandfather. I'm too old to be your father. And while I know I'm not your father, I know I'm not your father. That's not going to keep me from talking to you like you're my son. I know I'm not your father, and somebody can talk to me and he ain't my father. I know I'm not your father. But that's not going to keep me from talking to you like you are my daughter. Because you are my future. You're going to have an opportunity to go places that I will never go. You're going to see things that I will never see. You're going to function in a world that's absolutely foreign to me. My young adults are young adults. My daughter is 30. My son is 28. And when the box came out that you had to put on the television and get the new station, I had to call my son in Philadelphia and say, when you coming down? I'm not good with that stuff. When my cell phone gets filled up and my box can't take no more, I get on the phone and say, when you coming down? My wife teaches math and copying, and when they come to some of the things that she needs to get on and do on her computer, she gets on the phone and says, when you coming down? You're living in a world that I will never really have to function in at my age. But it'll be necessary for you, not just to survive, but to excel in that world. And what I'm saying to you is don't take another step in your future without the person, the presence, the power, and the protection of Immanuel. If you keep reading in Matthew, not only does it say his name is Immanuel in verse 23, but check it out, Miss Brown. If you read two more verses, to verse 25, it says, he shall be called Jesus. That's right. Look, I understand, I do stuff on purpose. You know why? Because I know little minds are picking up. In church, I'll say, and all over the church, I hear the kids say, somebody in here before we leave will say, and so when I say, I know somebody will pick it up. Little minds pick it up. Little minds didn't pick it up. But as long as you remember what I'm saying to you, that's all that matters. Somebody didn't wake up until they heard. Am I making sense? Here's my point, and I only got one point. I only got 1 point. I only got 1 point. I only got 1 point. Kurt. Is your name Kurt? I got 1 point. Brother Butler. I only got 1 point. Anybody know what the 1 point is? Immanuel. God with us. God with you. God with me. His person. His presence. His power. And His protection. The greatest gift of all is Jesus. Don't take another step in your future without Him. God bless you.